Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty. I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Christopher Prunty. On today's episode, we have an extra special guest, the hosts of the Undercommon Taste podcast, Ian and James. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on.
Well, thanks for having us. We're glad to be here.
We're very excited to be here, yes.
Yeah. So for those of us who might not know what Undercommon Taste is, or if you want to just chill your heart out, please tell us everything about it and yourselves.
All right. Well, Undercommon Taste is a podcast where we create and discuss homebrew content for tabletop RPGs. Our original tagline is where we stir the pot and lick the spoon. And most of our stuff is focused on 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons because that's where the audience is. But we do a lot of mechanical, system agnostic advice and topics. Things like how to create compelling NPCs, how to build a realistic town in a tabletop role-playing game. Things like that, things that can be brought in whole cloth or piecemeal into someone else's game. Right. And advice to help people turn their big nebulous abstract ideas into concrete game mechanics.
Right. One of the things we really wanted to try to focus on with our homebrew, and like I said, particularly focusing on the mechanics, is it's really easy to come up with a great character idea or a great concept that might work. And then when you get there and you put it on the table, you notice that it's either way overpowered or way underpowered, or for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. And so we go through and we try to measure our builds and our concepts with what's already out there, kind of get an idea of a range of what something should be, and kind of give some guidelines and some guide rails for you to build your own characters as well. We're trying to help people get more ideas of trying to be able to create their own items as well as just what we put out. And maybe get more people to the table, more people, maybe try to help them be a little braver to DM or try some new things out, because a lot of people kind of get stuck in that little rut that they run the same 2 or 3 things every time.
Yeah, I think one of the more recent episodes that I noticed you guys had was how to create or modify monsters, and that is one of the things that brought me into the hobby in and of itself was the Monster Manual. That was actually the first D&D book. It was 3.0 Monster Manual. And that in and of itself, I had no idea how the rules worked. I had no idea anything else about the game, but the Monster Manual in and of itself brought me in. And the idea that I could create my own, that little index in the back, the appendix in the back, was really what brought me into the hobby and what got me excited, really excited about, fantasy and everything like that.
Yeah, we've gone through and done a couple of episodes where we have taken some of the 3rd edition monsters. Specifically, we've done the Ragamuffin and the Spellweaver, which are both really awesome monsters that James and I both absolutely love, and tried to port them into 5th edition so that we could use them in 5th edition, but also using them as a framework, plus the rules that are laid out in the back of the DMG for creating a monster, calculating challenge rating, doing all of those things, and making something step by step that someone could follow along with as a guideline, so that you don't just stare at this wall of text and say, okay, it says all of these things, now what? Because there are some aspects of it that are kind of confusing if you don't have an example to go off of. Specifically calculating the challenge rating. It took us probably 15-20 minutes talking about it and butting our heads together to actually figure out, okay, what exactly are they talking about whenever we're calculating a challenge rating? Because challenge rating, it's more of a guideline than anything else, but it is something both that helps determine when you can expose your party to this monster and how much experience the party is going to get for defeating this monster. So you don't want to shortchange your party, but you also don't want to overwhelm them with something that you just thought was a cool idea.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah, CR has been like such a thing ever since it came out. Like that was really where like the 4 adventuring or the 4 combat encounters per day thing kind of came up. And by the way, your choice of the ragamuffin is an excellent one because I have very, very fond memories of the ragamuffin from back in 3.5 days. I think it was Dungeon Magazine that came out with an adventure that pretty heavily featured a ragamuffin or several actually. And I just fell in love with that monster around that time. I thought it was such an interesting design choice.
Yeah, the Ragamuffin's a really fun monster, and you had brought up earlier how it was the old monster manual that got you into the hobby in game, and I think that's a lot of our introductions. I think is that book, and it's got it has some fantabulous art, and a lot of it comes straight from the '80s and early '90s.
Mm-hmm.
Those old comics, they were really great. My introduction to the game, like I said on our podcast forever ago, was I was in elementary school and there was some guys playing. I'm sure it was second edition, but they had the maps out or the little square maps out, and they had the lists and the charts and the tables for everything. And I just found the intricacy of the game absolutely fascinating. And then, of course, the monster manual and these big scary monsters that could be nebulous or definitely evil or not things. Then it was kind of that forbidden thing. Oh, I shouldn't have this, but I did. So it was one of those things that kind of like drew me in that way as well. So I mean, yeah, that's kind of pretty close to how I got involved with an interest in the game as well.
Mm. All right. Well, we're not just here to talk about monster manuals, and we're not just here to talk about how we got into the hobby or your podcast. This is our podcast, God damn it! And from what I understand, you've brought a premise for us today that we're going to build not a world but a region around. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing. Yeah.
All right. So why don't you gentlemen go ahead and introduce the premise, and then give us one of your tenets for the premise.
All right. So the premise for this particular region is an object which has created a safe haven in an otherwise inhospitable land.
All right, that is a brilliant, interesting, fascinating topic. I know that a little inside baseball. We've already talked about the possibilities here, but what is one of the tenets that you decided to go with?
James, do you want to lead off on this one, or do you want me to?
I'll let you lead off, and I'll pick up from there.
Okay. So the tenet that I want to bring is that the object itself is technology and not magic, but that it's so old that it has become a divine object.
So we're talking Numenera, like 10,000 million years into the future type thing, where there's that line that separates between magic and technology. I love that.
Also known as the Dying Earth genre.
Yes, very much.
Is that what the genre is called?
Yes.
Oh,
To Daniel, it is.
That is
okay.
That is an old
It is
trope for old sci-fi. I love it.
Yeah, it's a legitimate literary genre. So.
Look, Daniel, I'm just going to poke the bear whenever I can, okay?
You seem like you're trying to convince yourself as well as me.
I know, it does. It sounds a little desperate, right? I'm just saying.
I have the Dying Earth books on my shelf. I need no convincing.
All right. So we've got this item. We don't know what it does yet, but I'm already fascinated. But that it is an ancient technology that has now been. Now, you said specifically divine. I like that idea as well. That it's not just a magical item, but a divine one.
It's perceived as divine. It doesn't necessarily have to be divine. It's one of those things where they've been so far separated from its origins and its original intended purpose that they've forgotten what the actual original intended purpose of this object was, and they just attribute it to being a divine gift of some sort.
Okay. And James, did you have a follow-up tenet for that?
Yes, I did. Since this object, whatever it may be, creates basically an oasis of some sort in an otherwise inhospitable area, people think it's divine. So the surrounding area, this becomes basically a pilgrimage site for people. One, like I said, it's an oasis for an inhospitable whatever, so it's a safer place to go to. But then it's also everyone wants to come and see the source of this, whatever it is that creates it, be it magic, be it technology, however they want to encompass that. But something like Mecca or the Wailing Wall, or I don't know, maybe, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if you're into that kind of thing, or the Super Bowl. But it's something that draws people to it just so they can say they were near it.
So it's not just an item that creates a haven. It's a center of tourism, or even a pilgrimage in some cases, right?
Yes, exactly.
Excellent.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. You're saying that it encompasses the entire area, but people go to the source. It's not as if. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we've got a holy site. We've got a pilgrimage area. I'm loving this so far. Do we have any? Okay. I'm going to ask this.
I have a good segue if that's what you're asking.
I was going to say,
always
yeah.
have great segues.
Okay. Yeah. Chris, famous for his segues. Absolutely correct. Do you have the reason or the element or something along those lines that this is or the reason that this is a haven, Chris?
No, but I was going to build upon the divine nature in such a way.
Then by all means, what is your tenet?
My tenet was going to be that there are a very slight amount of people who can live in the inhospitable area, but they are looked down upon as being less than, or say whatever changed in them that allows them to adapt and live in the outside the oasis. People kind of call them just like, oh, that's because you've been tainted by the outside. The only reason you can live out there is because your lungs can handle the toxic area. So you're toxic in yourself, and we don't really like that you come into the oasis.
Okay.
So is that kind of like the old, was it Kevin Costner Waterworld with the people that could breathe water, or the troglodytes from the Time Machine?
I was even thinking like the Bedouin, like if we're talking about like desert areas and stuff like that, where they're more nomadic.
Yeah, my idea was more centered from the idea of the, I think they were called the Ashwalkers or Dustwalkers in Morrowind.
Oh, okay, nice.
Ashlanders?
Ashlanders, thank you.
All right.
So here's the question I have. Is it going to be that the people outside are viewed as lesser, or that the people on the inside are viewed as privileged, or both?
I like both.
Yeah,
I think both. Yeah. I think both lends to more interesting plot hooks, more interesting cultural ideas as well.
And
the people from the outside aspire to be able to go inside,
and then hide their adaptation.
Yeah. Okay.
I would even go so far as to say there's probably like clades or like different groups that the closer you get to the center, the more fanatical and the more likely you are to want to join the center is in some way.
I love that. I was going to ask if any of you guys ever played the old Fallouts, Fallout 2 in particular.
Yes.
Chris is a huge fan. I know that much.
So you had in Fallout 2, you had Vault City, which, they had found their Gek and brought it up. And so they were all, and that's kind of how they looked, is they looked down upon anybody who wasn't a vault dweller or outside the vaults. They were just less than. So the question of if the people were less than or privileged, I think would really be determined on who you asked at that point.
Oh, yeah.
It naturally would develop that since over here is the oasis of where people come from, and then the adaptation would happen over the course of a very long period of time. This is where industry and culture and everything had time to build up, and then outside, as people get pushed out, they literally live on the fringe of society.
Yeah, I like that.
Now, Daniel, does your tenet tell us anything about the area or how the oasis functions?
Yes, but it depends on how much you want me to fuck it up.
Okay. I was expecting contrarian Daniel here, so I'm glad that I thought ahead of time. I'm going to give my tenet then, and then Daniel, you can kind of you can tell us what the oasis is looking like. So my tenet is the object, in this case, this divine relic, has a catastrophic side effect that most people are unaware of.
Ooh.
Yeah. See, nice. I was expecting Daniel to go in some direction that was similar to this.
That was one of my two.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. I had an inkling that Daniel was going to go this way, and I'm glad that I brought it up before he did. So That's what we got. Now, Daniel, tell us about the Oasis itself.
So here's how I'm gonna fuck it up. Because the one tenant that you mentioned is what I had in mind, that there's a dark side. But the other tenant I was thinking about is that the object or the location is actually constantly on the move. It's elusive or impossible to keep in one location. So I don't know whether that means the entire place that they congregate around moves or the object itself.
No, that's actually really cool.
I like that. So it'd be like a nomadic camp around it.
Yeah, maybe whatever makes sense. But the idea is that the holy thing is always changing its location.
No, that's super cool. I like that idea a lot.
Kind of like a wandering island, maybe.
Yeah,
I was thinking island, or for some reason I had this idea of just like a monster with something strapped on its back.
It's turtles all the way down.
Yeah, yeah. I was hoping for a lion turtle.
Wait, if you make it moving, the object is not just an object. It is the walking god kind of thing. Like they worship also the being that is the object.
So actually that works really well because the people can revere the creature not knowing that there is a divine relic that is causing the actual purification or whatever the fuck you want to call it. Like they think it's the monster, but in reality it's this ancient technology that's strapped onto the monster.
So I would ask a couple questions. Would it be a monster that moves, which is a great idea, or would it teleport from time to time? And if it was a monster that moves, is it actually a biological creature or is it mechanical? Is it still tech?
See, now we got some questions that we can really ask, because
I think there's something tactily interesting from a narrative point of view if it's physically moving rather than teleporting.
I am with that as well.
Yeah.
I'm now thinking that we can do because I love the idea of having expedition to barrier peaks that is just so happened to be on the back of a monster. So there's essentially like a crashed spaceship, but this kaiju thing is so massive that it just so happens to have that be part of its biology now in some way.
So instead of the city built on the Tarrasque, it is literally built on the Tarrasque.
Oh yeah, okay. Or it's almost like a hermit crab that just so happened to use a retrofitted spaceship and now it's walking around in some way.
That is epic.
That's awesome. I love that.
Is it headed someplace that would imperil their society? Since Rob, you said it causes it basically will have a serious problem. It's very dangerous in some way.
Potentially, but I left the catastrophic side effect vague enough to where we can argue and kind of think of something really interesting that can go along with that. It doesn't necessarily have to be that the monster is the threat, but we can have it be something like,
does someone else want the monster that's outside the society?
There was actually I think it was a comic or a story it had a being that had a city on its back, and the thing that they were terrified is just like, hey, we don't know if it was Discworld. They didn't know if it was male or female, and they're like, what if a mate comes along?
Oh, okay.
That would be really interesting, yeah.
Well, we have this general concept, but we don't have the idea of what about it creates a safe haven. So what creates a safe haven in an otherwise inhospitable land? Let's nail that down because we haven't really talked about that aspect yet.
Well, I was thinking about it kind of like a terraforming device of some sort.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe it was one of those things where the terraforming device, maybe they got the calculations wrong and it just wasn't powerful enough to actually terraform the entire planet. Or maybe they got whenever they planted it, it was, they didn't realize that they were planting it on a creature, and so the terraforming device's interaction with the biology of the creature has altered its function somehow.
All right. Has anyone seen the best Miyazaki movie, which is Princess Mononoke? Because you can have the god in that where it walks, life kind of springs up. You can call this thing the Springwalker and have vegetation and everything rise within its wake. But
That's what
that
I was thinking too.
yes. All right, Daniel. See, this is why we
Yeah.
host a podcast together.
Because
Exactly.
if it's like a terraformed, like you're saying, if it's like some fragmented terraforming technology left on this creature and the thing's still functioning and it's moving, now you're leaving this like pathway of greenery that may be what they see as a safe haven and possibly even civilizations that have sprung up in its wake.
Yeah, I was going to say, if it's moving, it would be hard to set up a city with something moving constantly, particularly when you're dealing with like agriculture. But then, like, if the planet's just like blooming right behind it as this thing moves, obviously it's going to move incredibly slow.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
But I think yeah, something became extremely verdant as it passed by. So maybe people try to set up something or try to predict where it's going to go and try to set up things in front of it so it passes through their area so they can maximize the time that they're going to have of this growth or bounty, as it were.
Is it a living continent or a living tectonic plate?
I like plate more than continent. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, when it goes into the ocean, that'd be interesting too.
Yeah, it would be.
absolutely. And not only that, but there's now a political jockeying where, can you sway the creature to go in one direction? Is that possible? Can you lure it in a certain way?
I also like the idea of wherever it started, the pilgrimage starts there and then it goes to where it is. So like many points of journey of people like trying to head it off of where it's going to be.
Yeah, I like that. That's actually a very reasonable. So you're following the path of this thing as part of your pilgrimage journey. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I would almost see it as being a circuit, like it moves seasonally, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So it follows a defined path, and that defined path is the safe area, is
It's
the
a
safe
migration.
haven.
I
Yeah,
like
Yeah,
that.
it's a migration,
Yeah.
and so you can somewhat rely upon it making it back to a certain place after a certain amount of time, and so the people who live here, they have based their entire calendar on the passage of this creature.
So it'd be like the Nile flooding. And that's really good too, because if this thing walks a circuit or a set path, then maybe like in the center, there's a constant overlap. And there you could have, like I said, some permanence involved or some agriculture or something like that, where there's always a constant, at least some minor influence of this creature or device.
That might be the center where these elites live, is in the center of this path, because yes, it's not as dramatic a vibrant ecology there, but it's steady, it's constant, it
Mhm.
always is as it is because it's equidistant from the creature at any given time.
It could also be that there is something that brings this creature to the place and has it. Maybe this is the part in the journey where it stops to rest and drink water, and kind of it leaves a longer lasting impact on that area more so than the other stops in its migration.
I could
Okay.
see that too. Yeah, that works really well. And then that would get back into your political jockeying of how to either attract it or dissuade it or guide it in some way. Somehow, if you could get it to stop at a certain region versus another region for some reason. So people are gathering like tribute or leaving gifts to maybe let it sit and graze or slow down or something like that.
I would almost go the other way, though. I would almost see this as the jockeying is for who controls the area that the creature's about to go into.
Both are valid.
Controlling the territory around the creature rather than the creature itself.
Mhm.
In the way that you guys are describing its quote unquote migratory patterns, it almost makes me think, and also because it's revered and it's unpredictable in a way that this culture wants to control it. It almost makes me think that this probably isn't actually alive or a creature. It might actually be the technology itself. Like I could imagine almost if this was a failed experiment or a failed technology from some other civilization to terraform this planet, which we were suggesting before, it could have been the technology is repeating a pattern of terraforming but failing to achieve that. So that could be one interpretation, maybe from an outsider's point of view, if not that it's an actual living thing.
So it's like that Roomba that keeps bumping the wall and just keeps going back.
I have never played it, but Horizon Zero Dawn
is a wonderful game.
Yeah.
It's on my to do, but I believe at some point animals also got integrated with like the technology itself. So could you have it that this giant beast is not just integrated with it, but it's the reason it has its immortality is because it's infused and combined with the technology to such an extent that there is a question if it's biological or technological.
I think that's probably the best of both worlds. I think
I like that.
I think that the object itself has probably integrated itself into its biology at this point.
And
it was a terraforming machine that just took use of the raw materials it could find nearby.
Oh, that's horrifying, and
Yeah, I
also
like that.
probably what we're going with. Yeah,
Yeah.
Could have been
Right.
like a beneficial virus that's kind of not quite done what it's supposed to.
Rob had mentioned like it being a kaiju, and I was kind of thinking like Mecha Godzilla or something like that, or like Pacific Rim. So at that point, I was kind of thinking that blend between biological and tech anyway.
We've settled all of the other tenets, but I want to know what the catastrophic side effect is that most people are unaware of for this kaiju, this terraforming kaiju thing.
I have a couple that would be feasible. So if it's prompting plant growth, I think the really easy ones are radiation, either be it UV or just like maybe like alpha or beta radiation, where it's a low level, but it's kind of trying to stimulate growth. Beyond that, maybe stimulating growth causes cancer in people, or possibly the chemicals that are required to promote plant growth at any point tends to poison people over time. Maybe it's like a cumulative poison.
That's Chris's culture. The people on the outside who are surviving in the wild. That's not being terraformed.
Right.
There's also an option that we could go here where the vegetation is in some way addictive, where the reason that the outsiders are looked upon so poorly is because they are essentially looking in and being like, oh wow, you are all addicted to this vegetation or this plant life or this food, or something about it is drawing these people to it in a really dangerous way.
Look at all them pollen junkies in there.
Yeah, totally.
Pretty much, yeah. I was also thinking of the Star Trek episode Symbiosis, where one group of aliens doesn't know that it's addicted. They think that they're infected by some disease.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I remember that episode. Yeah, that was a great episode.
Yeah. That's like one of the good episodes from season 1, from what I understand.
They made like the side effects of the drug and everything much worse over time. Just like, yeah, if they had free reign, we would get bulldozed by them. So
right, because they like barely had any technology, and their entire infrastructure was based around developing and selling this drug to the neighboring planet.
Yeah, no, I remember that. Yeah, that was a great episode.
I do have an idea of a bad side effect.
Go ahead.
That we can paint towards the outsiders, maybe knowing something. What if, even though I could have sworn someone said something to this effect in the Discord at some point, but what if they know that the power source is finite and or dying, and they're like, this is an illusion, this isn't a solution. We need to learn how to survive outside of the terraformed area.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so a drive for self-sufficiency. I like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think we can probably combine all three ideas as well, where we can probably make it so that the outsiders are survivalists who see the decadence and the addiction that's inflicting those that are closer to it. And also maybe they understand that this thing can't last, it's dying out. I mean, maybe the machine is like finally eroding or consuming the last biological components. And when it does, that's when something really awful happens.
That's when it starts consuming people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Skynet becomes self-aware.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When it no longer cares about the biological on its planet, it starts optimizing for itself.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. And not only that, but it probably has, I mean, if we're going with like the severe machine route, I imagine that it has like genetic information that it's been gathering as it's been walking back and forth forever. You know, because there are humans or whatever humanoids that are in the way that I'm sure have been trampled and crushed and killed by this thing and also already consumed. I'm sure that's happened once or twice. Actually, I could even see it as some cultures using it as an execution method or a methodology of like martyrdom in some way.
That was terrifying, but I could see that too.
I would almost see it because it is an object of almost divine reverence. That's part of their funeral practices. They give over the bodies to the creature.
Wow!
Put it in its wake. No, put it in its
path so that it will consume the bodies to progress the development of the planet.
Now we're getting into some like Dune type things, where we're extracting water from people for the rest of the siege.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your water, Friedman.
I like that a lot. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay. So we've really got things come together here. This is really cool.
This took a dark turn real fast too. I like it.
Welcome to our podcast. Yeah, absolutely.
You guys never do the bright and sunny.
Okay, the one time we tried to do bright and sunny with our Land of 1,000 Flavors, Chris tried to mess it up with like these horrible cultists and zombies, and I'm like, Chris, this is the one series that didn't go dark, for Christ's sake.
Was it salt wraiths?
Yeah,
it was the salt wraiths.
They also scraped the taste buds off their tongue, if you remember that.
Self-flagellation.
Flagellation, yeah, exactly.
So the question I would bring up next, and I hope I'm not stomping on anybody's toes. We talked about an inhospitable land, and I think we batted this around in the Discord once or twice, but what makes the land otherwise inhospitable? Is it barren? Is it a desert? Is it Arctic? Is it just rocky flats? I mean, what are we looking at out on the outside? Obviously, it can support some small amount of life because you do have your outsiders.
I kind of want this to be a frozen planet.
See, I had the opposite direction. I wanted it to be a desert of some kind. Because
I was thinking it should be the opposite of that, which was like it's over fertile. And so the terraforming project was to control the wild.
How does that work?
So like I'm thinking, because you typically, and when you have a post-apocalyptic landscape, you would think of one of two things. Either it's some crazy extreme or it's the absence of something, right? But what if it's like overabundance of something? So like the world is so overpopulated by some kind of flora that's dangerous. Like think kudzu, but like times a million. And so it's impossible to actually settle or colonize or live in it unless you actually control the flora, which would then lend to the concept of what this machine is trying to do, which is creating a more manageable path through the wilds. So like, I know there's this RPG that just came out too, that's like, I forget what it is, but it's like, instead of an ocean, it's an ocean of like plant life.
Is that the one that has the chainsaw ships?
Yes, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
So tying in with some historical reference, because I'm a bit of a history and science geek, one of the first major die-outs in Earth's history was kind of the same thing what you guys were talking about, was there were so many plants producing so much oxygen, and there was not enough oxygen-consuming creatures, that fire was an incredible risk. I think the oxygen was like 24 or 25% of the Earth's atmosphere. So thinking about a spark caused these huge conflagrations. So maybe if we were going that route, that would be something, and fire would be a huge risk for these people as well.
Well, I'm down with that.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds fun. That's interesting. That's something that you don't hear very often. So I'm all for that.
Okay, yeah, I'm down for that too. Let's do it.
Right.
So this thing essentially burns everything in its path, is what I'm hearing?
No, it's basically like a giant. It's a giant like Roomba lawnmower. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lawnmower set to the 3 setting as opposed to the 2 or the 4 setting.
As this thing passed, maybe it clears out enough undergrowth. Again, talking about the need for agriculture and a farm. Maybe it clears out a lot of brush or undergrowth, so you could temporarily build something or set down some farms instead of having like giant thick woody plants or a bunch of brambles and stuff. It actually clears the land out, where again, if you tried to burn it out, do a backburning like the Aboriginals or anything like that, just the whole place would burn down.
The other thing, to go back to how people can't really live out there, not just from the sense of being able to not really farm very well, what if it was also like a disease or a reaction of like all of the stuff that lives out there, just the abundance of life now,
So you're looking at like a malaria situation,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I want to propose something. I'm a huge fan of the Mass Effect video game series, and so maybe taking something from there, it's a different structured protein in those plants. So would be dextro versus levo proteins, and so humans going out, or these humanoids going out into there, would have an allergic reaction, a violent allergic reaction to contact or consumption of these proteins.
Oh, that's cool. I
That's
think that's
like
really
cool. Yeah.
And that could
Something
lead to why the plants on the inside were addictive as well, because the change of those proteins would obviously change how they digest and break down.
Oh,
Look at this all coming together. I'm
I
fucking
like it.
loving this.
need
Yeah.
more science in it. That's what's happening.
I feel like the people following this thing actually just have like mech suits that are nothing but like air filters and dehumidifiers, and they're like, I'm going into the waste.
I can also see like really deadly like living plants from a fantasy perspective. You know, like
Mhm.
they're the kind of plants you don't actually want to physically encounter because they will rip you apart.
Okay. So like the Venus mantrap and things like that.
Yeah. They're
I
like
like it.
partially mobile.
Or also the movie Jumanji, because
Yes.
I got to bring up a terrible '90s movie during a podcast. It's contractually
dare you.
obligated of me.
So if there's a Venus mantrap, are there giant pipes these things sit in?
Obviously.
Okay, just had to ask.
So we're just a planet full of shambling mounds. Is that what we're saying?
I love shambling mounds. I love vegetation as
And assassin
monster.
vines. Oh
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Or
It's
you
all of
could
them.
do the yellow musk creeper. You could get all of the cool D&D plant monsters in one like overgrown location. I'm incredibly happy with that. So yeah.
You know who would love this thing? A giant black dragon.
The green dragons.
Yeah,
green
green
dragons
dragons,
are the ones
yeah.
that live in forests.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, black dragons are the swamp dwellers.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm thinking,
They could
yeah,
look
because
too.
these plants, I'm thinking kind of swampy, but yeah, either one would work. Both of those would be
Mm.
fun. Not this case, but definitely fun.
You get that more around the equator of the planet.
Yeah.
Well, actually, why not? This giant monster that we're talking about, it doesn't necessarily have to be the Tarrasque, but
Yeah, could it not be an ancient worm?
yeah, I was thinking that, or like a wingless ancient worm of some kind.
Ooh,
Is
I
what
like
I was
that.
thinking.
That's weird.
Or if we're going D&D specific, we could even go with a Behir.
Okay.
It's one of those like 8-legged like lightning spitting dragons that don't have any wings.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, if we wanted to play into the mechanical aspect of it, you know, because if we're going with D&D, we have all of the planes, all of the various planes of existence that we can play with, and we could totally grab some sentient constructs from the lawful plane of Mechanus
Mhm.
into this.
Okay. Oh, okay. So this planet, this society is essentially a planet that's been taken over by a chaotic plant species.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
And
yes.
then-
And then there's this giant construct sent from Mechanus to clear it out because it has to establish balance.
Yeah,
Right. Exactly.
that's
right.
beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
Either of you read SCP?
No, I don't
Since
believe
I don't
so.
recognize the thing,
so-
probably not.
Secure, contain, protect.
No.
No.
Oh, in it they have two gods that are kind of fighting each other. One is like Mega Knight, and the other is Catharsis.
Nice.
No, McCain or something.
Okay.
But anyhow, it's Machine God versus Animal God.
Oh,
Is what it-
That sounds kind of similar to what we're dealing with here as well. So I think that works. So okay, I think that we're at a solid point where we can probably do a little mini world building jam and come up with the anchor that we're going to be rolling into for your next podcast. How's that sound?
That sounds like a great
sounds
idea to
great,
me.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to be doing a little mini world building jam that's going to help us create an anchor for the next plot, or actually just an anchor for this world in general. We already have the monster, but if we can get something else or even another monster that plays another significant role, that'd be really interesting. So what we're going to be rolling is some dice, obviously, but those dice will tell us what the subject of the anchor is going to be, whether it be an item, a monster, a place, an historical figure, an event, or a cataclysm. So we're going to roll some dice and see what that is. Gentlemen, we have another monster that we're going to be rolling with here. And we have a theme that we've got, whether it be between tragedy, sacrifice, love, metamorphosis, pride and honor, madness and the unspeakable, triumph and hope, and treachery and revenge. So the theme for this monster is going to be triumph and hope. So we've got, okay, this is actually really interesting now, because we've got a monster that is it opposing this other monster, or is it a part of the ecosystem in some way? As the guests, you have the floor to start us off with. So Ian and James, take it away.
I'm tempted right off the bat, particularly since we have triumph and hope. It's opposing the monster, because we have said while this thing is here to terraform the planet, we have made it very clear that this is a failed creation.
Very true. Plus, we have the outsiders, so this monster could be the patron god of the outsiders if we wanted it to be.
Also true.
I would almost want it to be kind of like, since this is going to be a Dungeons and Dragons setting, almost want it to be like an avatar of a nature god, maybe.
Ooh.
Something that gives triumph and hope to those who aren't under the thrall of this giant mechanical beast.
Potentially, yeah. Like, I know Ian and I in our current podcast we've been dealing with some planes, so we just dealt with a bunch of Fae, which would really be a lot of fun to throw in this right now. Get some Arch Fae in there, because they're going to be, particularly the Summer Court, they're going to be loving all this growth anyway. So we could throw them in there trying to do that. Again, an Arch Druid of some sort as well, if you don't want to go the Fae route. Again, trying to get that this is a machine, therefore it's unnatural and it's going to fail, versus a Druid that's about natural growth and natural, sustainability. Creating or trying to summon obviously another monster to go against this. And if it just happens to be, since you mentioned kaiju, a giant gorilla, we do have Godzilla versus King Kong coming up. Just putting that out in the universe.
Okay. All right. God damn, that's hard not to take. Okay.
Right. And another thing, because we've gone this whole time not stopping to ask ourselves, was there sentient life here before the terraforming initiation?
That is a great question.
Because if there was, then this triumph and hope is the hope that these native sentient species have of driving these invaders off of their planet, out of their world.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Again, we can go back with some of those plant monsters. Maybe those plant monsters are sentient.
It's myconids.
Yes. Oh my God. Circle of the Mushroom Druids. Please. Circle of the Mushroom Druids everywhere.
It's a circle of spores, Archdruid.
See, I always preferred like Vegapygmies or even the Leshies. Like, yeah, the Vegapygmies are cool. Actually, one of my if we could go back, I do want to point out one of my favorite modules of all time is the 3.0 Sunless Citadel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
They actually remade that for 5th edition.
Really? They did?
Yes.
Oh, well, rightfully so. But also, that's amazing.
Trying to remember which module it's in. I'm wanting to say it's in one of the Waterdeep ones. It's one of the earlier on ones that ends up leading you into Waterdeep.
So the reason I bring up the Sunless Citadel is because it has twig blights, which are essentially just like twisted little like vegetable humans.
I love running blights.
Yeah,
I love running blights.
They're amazing, and also they're born from like the tree of a dead vampire, which I also think maybe we don't have to necessarily go Summer Court. Why not go Winter Court and make it really fucked up and evil? And this triumphant hope doesn't necessarily have to be, for the benefit, but we can make it, a little bit more morally gray, so it's not so clear as to who's good and who's bad here.
Absolutely,
I like that.
because might makes right according to the Winter Court.
That's right.
Exactly.
And I like that if we go and we have like a circle of druids and a bunch of plant life that was here originally, they were looking to make a deal with anything and anyone who was able to help, and maybe Winter stepped up first, or Winter offered faster and more substantial help.
Yeah, I would imagine that the summer court, they're like, we're going to trick this mechanical thing, or like maybe we'll try some illusion magic, and then when that just utterly failed, they had to turn to the Winter Court, and they're like, all right, what you got?
I'm going to kneecap it.
Get me some red caps. Get me what you got to stop this thing. You know.
So are our outsiders going to be largely the same as the people that are following and revering this mobile tech, and then the primitive, or not the primitive, but I guess you'd call them the Aboriginal peoples? They were there first. Are further removed, or are the outsiders mixed with them? So you'd kind of have maybe a half elf type thing, a half native, whatever. Or how would you balance that? Or are the outsiders fully people that were unfamiliar with it? I'm not phrasing that exactly right.
So it seems like there's three options, and I like to think that there's the native, the ones that is kind of like the invasive ones, and then a hybrid of the two.
I like that.
That's what I was thinking as well.
I would almost see your hybrid as being invaders who have gone native, rather than actually being biologically changed.
Okay,
I can see a combination of both of those. So maybe there's four. Maybe you have the two diametrically opposed, and then one that's switched on both sides, and then that makes up the creamy middle gray area that we're talking about here.
I like it. Yeah, that seems to fit.
Mm-hmm.
So is there an intermixing with the biology, or is it purely philosophical mixing?
I prefer this. Now, this is a preference on my end, but when it comes to fantasy races, I'm always one to have the philosophical matter more than the biological.
I could see it being a combination of being able to, say, go out into the woods and suffer a bit in it for a long period of time might adapt you more, whereas the people who keep returning to the city, they never get the natural antibodies or get used to it.
That's actually not a bad idea either. Yeah.
It's more of a cultural assimilation than a biological assimilation.
Yes. And I think that we can also speak to the addictive quality of this thing, and what surrounds that in that regard, if that makes sense.
Well, it might not be an actual addiction. It might be withdrawal, because they're leaving this toxic area.
Yeah. All right. So we've got this anchor point. We've got a conflict that we've set up. And now, gentlemen, I think we're here and we're ready for the twist. Now, our twists are provided by our patrons and others in general. So thank you to them. And we're going to roll this twist and see how it goes, because, oh boy, this is already grounded in D&D. So I'm hoping that we get something that makes everything really weird. So let's see.
Aliens did it.
This has all happened before, is our twist. And for that, I know that we've already got a million ideas and everything like that. But for that, we're actually going to kick it over to the Undercommon Taste podcast, where we'll finish this whole exploration out. And sound good?
Sounds great.
Right. So for everyone who might not know where that is, where can we find the Undercommon Taste podcast?
Our podcast is available on most streaming services, Undercommon Taste. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Undercommon Taste. We're on Twitter at UCT Homebrew.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing role play prompts 6 days a week I got a Shakespearean insult page a day calendar for Christmas, and as an incentive to myself to actually use my page a day calendar, I've been posting the insult of the day and then an inspired RP prompt off of that. So I get Saturday, Sundays on the same page, so you get 6 a week. But that's what I've been doing, and I've really enjoyed doing it so far. It's given me a chance to actually get some creative juices going, since I don't have a game running right now because there's a pandemic on.
Yeah, everyone, I'm sure can relate to that in some way, because a lot of games are stopped right now because of COVID. But we're not going to end this on a bummer, God damn it. So what you can do, you can go over to their podcast. These episodes should be coming out around the same time, if not the same day, then pretty damn close to it. And check out the rest of this world building gem on their podcast. And that will wrap it up for this episode of World Build with us. Thank you so much to Ian and James for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thanks for having us.
We've
really enjoyed being over here.
Absolutely. And remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always email us at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com, or you can shoot us a tweet over at Let's Worldbuild on Twitter. You can join our Discord and become part of our community, or if you're feeling particularly generous, you can always give us money on Patreon. Links for all of that and the Undercommon Taste podcast link will be in the description as well. So remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together. Until next week.